Is Jesse Wieland. I work in the Office of National Fellowships here at Florida State. I predominantly work with the Fulbright and the Gilman Scholarship, but I also lead the Goldwater Scholarship, which is one of the main ones we'll be talking about today. And then we're going to breeze through a lot of the other STEM-focused and research-focused fellowships that our office works with. And I'll be trying to check the chat as I'm chatting and rambling and make sure to answer your questions as we go, but we'll definitely have time for that at the end. And so feel free to, if something stands out to you, just type it in the chat. We can get to it later. And then later, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have. But let me go ahead and get the PowerPoint pulled up. Perfect. So I already introduced myself, but we'll have our contact information down at the very end, and so make sure to write that down as well. So the Goldwater Scholarship, for those of you who haven't heard of it, it's one of the more prestigious awards that recognizes undergraduates conducting research. This is an opportunity where if you are currently involved in research, your application is going to be focused on discussing the research that you're doing and the direction that it's headed. But if you haven't yet been able to engage in research, that's absolutely fine too. Your application will just take on a little bit of a different focus in detailing an issue that is very important to you, and how hopefully future research that you're going to get involved in will help address that. And so the Goldwater Scholarship, it incorporates a lot of STEM fields, but the common theme for all applicants is that what Goldwater is looking for are applicants that are committed to a career in research. And so, as we'll talk a little bit later, in almost every facet of this application, from your essays to your recommendation letters to your short responses, is if we can tie it all of that back into how you're going to use this in your career as a researcher, or the type of research that you're wanting to commit to. It all goes back to that. And so this is an opportunity for current sophomores and juniors. And so it's if you apply as a sophomore and you receive it, you get funding for 2 years. If you apply as a junior and you receive it, you get funding for 1 year. And this is one that you can reapply to if you happen to be a sophomore. They're looking for students that have excelled in their coursework relative to their major. And so you may see on their website that I think it's anywhere from a 3.2 GPA and above. It's really more like a 3.7 and above, even though they say a 3.2. You do have to be a U.S. citizen, and then in the fields that you are studying in a field that you can see on their website how they break it down. But moving on from there, the scholarship, it's $7,500 per year that they award you, and that is to cover tuition fees, books, and your room and board. But the purpose is that they want you to be able to use this funding in a way that would allow you to focus more so on your research. So hopefully you don't have to worry about working another job to be able to pay for rent, or pay for just living. So they want you to be able to spend more time in the lab and more time committed to your research. A very common question that we get from a lot of people in these STEM fields is that they want to go to medical school. So are they still qualified to apply for Goldwater? And it's if that your career is focused on research. So they're not looking for people who want to be medical doctors per se. And so if that's you, then maybe Goldwater is not the best opportunity for you, but we definitely have plenty of others that would allow you to engage in your research or engage in your passions. I already kind of mentioned this. So if you receive this as a sophomore, you get funding for 2 years. If you apply as a junior, you get funding for 1 year. And this is a really competitive award. But the good news is they used to only have about 300 awards that they would give out nationally. but then they would also award honorable mentions. And so I believe this started last year, or it was 2 years ago. They decided to increase, instead of giving honorable mentions, they decided to increase the number of awards that they dole out. So they increased it to 500, still making it competitive, but odds of receiving it a little bit more likely. Can you apply as a finance major? I am not. That is a good question. That's one that I would have to look into, but it's one that we would. My guess is possibly not, but it depends on the nature of your research, and so I don't want you to think this is not for you yet. But we'll keep that in mind. Moving on from here. And so the applications should be, they should be opening any day if they aren't open already. But you can go on their website and start perusing that to start getting an idea for what it is you're going to need to submit. I think they should have some tips on how to approach your recommendation letter writers, and how to just navigate the application in general, because it is a little dense, but that is why myself and my colleagues are here to help you through all of that. Something that's really important to keep in mind is that for the Goldwater, we as a university can only nominate 4 candidates. We can also nominate a 5th candidate if you are a transfer student. So if anyone in attendance is a transfer student, please let us know at the beginning of the application cycle. That doesn't guarantee that you would be nominated, but it may allow us to nominate up to 5. So the reason that we have this campus deadline in November is because your application is reviewed by a committee at Florida State University that is made up of faculty from a lot of these different fields, these different STEM fields. And so they review your applications, and based on their knowledge of the National Review Committee, they choose 4 to nominate. And so if you are endorsed, you'll find out usually right before winter break, and then you'll get feedback from the committee, and then we have time to continue working on your application once you return at the beginning of January. So we'll have a few more weeks to make those improvements, to reach out to your recommenders and make sure that the application you're submitting is as polished as possible. Must the research be for a nonprofit purpose? Not necessarily. They're pretty open in terms of the type of research that you can be involved in. And so that's maybe a conversation we could delve a little bit more deeply into in a one-on-one into your specific research. And a political science major, again, I think it depends on the nature of the research that you are doing. So again, would love to talk to you about your specific interests during a one-on-one, but also refer to the website, and they should be able to give you a little bit more information, but it just depends on what you're doing specifically. Moving on. So the application is dense, to put it. The essays aren't terribly difficult to navigate. It is just a lot of information. So the application is essentially a deconstructed resume. It's going to be asking for a lot of information regarding your work experience, your research experience. There's a bunch of short responses that ask you about not just your research, but some challenging experiences that you've overcome. There's some bits where you're allowed to tell a little bit about your personal narrative. And so the application is dense. There's 3 letters of recommendation. It is really important that at least 2 of those, but ideally all 3 of them, are coming from STEM faculty. So people that you've either taken classes from, that you've developed relationships with, or people that you've engaged in research with. I know some of you who may be already involved in research may have close relationships with some PhD candidates. So maybe not necessarily your professor, the person overseeing this entire project, but someone that you've been engaging in research with, but doesn't necessarily have their degree yet. And if that's the case, what we always recommend is that talk to that individual. We're more than welcome to them writing the letter for you, but maybe that's something they could work with the the individual in charge of this project. Maybe it's something they could co-sign together, or maybe it's something that the individual you know very well could write it, and then it could be signed by the faculty member that's overseeing it. These supporting documents, so the main piece that we are going to be working on in these review sessions is your research essay. It's essentially 2 pages. It can be 2 columns, and that is, like I said earlier, if you are engaged in research, that is where you delve into the nature of what you have done. So your role within this project and any future direction is as to where this project is going. I have also had applicants in the past that have talked about the research that they've done and completed, but how they're now pivoting from that project into a new project, and that's totally fine too. But to reiterate, if you haven't yet engaged in research, it gives you space to detail an issue or a problem that you've seen that you want to address with a research project that you find or with faculty that you know. It does require your transcripts from both Florida State, or if you're a transfer student, from the institution that you were at previously. And so when it comes to economics, it is I'd have to go in and double check to see if that falls under Goldwater's classifications. It does for some, it doesn't for others. But for some of these opportunities that we'll talk about later, I think being an econ major would be totally fine. We'll just go in and double check for Goldwater. My apologies. I'm not going to sit here and read all of this to you, but it essentially boils down to exactly what I just said. With the research essay, this is the majority of the short responses do take time to develop, but usually applicants find those to be a little bit easier because they're asking for very niche questions that you don't have to go into as much detail with. But the research essay is just detailing everything that you've done and that you hope to do with the project that you are doing. The selection process is, okay, like we already talked about, the first step is the FSU committee to understand who we are endorsing as a university. And then once it's pushed on from that, it's going to be reviewed by different PhD faculty across the country in all different fields in which Goldwater reviews. And previously, this is also another recent change, it used to be a pool of everyone. So every field, everything is just kind of lumped together. But now they've sectioned it off to where you are competing. If you're a neuroscience major, you're competing against other neuroscience applicants. So you kind of stay within your field. Like I've already said, they're focused on your commitment to research. That is one of the main review criteria that they are looking for. They want to know that if we're going to invest in you and we're going to give you this award, that we know that the return on our investment is that we are gaining a researcher in this field. And the other criteria that they're looking for is, of course, that you've excelled in your major specific coursework. Let me check another question really quickly. If you have class at 4. Yes, so we're going to upload this video, if not today, then tomorrow, to our YouTube channel. And so you can go in and view that. Or feel free to reach out to me or anyone else within the Office of National Fellowships, and we would love to have a meeting with you one-on-one to go over this information. So totally fine if you need to dip out. Or if you find me extremely boring and you just want to get the hell out, that's fine too. But hopefully can keep you around for just a little bit longer. Now, so again, some of what has characterized scholars in the past is, although they say they accept a 3.2 GPA and above, it's really about a 3.7 or above in terms of who they accept. Now, I don't want you to feel discouraged if that's not where your GPA is at, because if one of the recipients that we're going to talk about later for one of these fellowships did not have a stellar GPA, but had a very compelling story and reason for why their GPA was not where they wanted it to be. So if you're sitting around like a 3.2, a 3.3, or a 3.4, but you have good reasons for maybe why your GPA is there, then I would still love to talk to you about working on an application like this. They want to make sure that applicants are basically following their course map. They want to make sure that you have done well in the courses that you've taken, but also you're basically in line to be attending graduate school upon your completing your undergraduate degree. They ideally, so they do accept people that have not yet engaged in research, as long as you can make a compelling case for what it is you hope to be doing. But typically, recipients are going to have at least a year of research experience. Again, just to really just hit the nail on the head, is that every response in your application goes back to that you're committed to a career in research. And the letters of recommendation, that they really want to see it from STEM faculty. So that's what I was saying, of like, ideally all three of them are coming from faculty, or at least two, but they want to see not just your capabilities as a student, but your capabilities as a researcher. And if they, in addition to that, they can also speak to your character, or maybe how you've engaged outside of the lab, which our Goldwater recipient, I'll go into a little bit more detail from this past year. She had some really good examples of that. And I think that's something that definitely boosted her application when it got to the national review stage. Yes. Okay. So, so Jessica Dixon was our recipient last year. She actually came to the process a little bit late, and so in terms of the campus deadline. And so when we started working together, it's we kind of had to pick up the pace and really hit the ground running. But typically, for any of these fellowships that our office works with, we typically ask that you at least start a month in advance. Goldwater, as soon as you're able to start, we should get on top of it. Now, something else that I should point out is my background is not in STEM. My background is firmly in education. And so when I sat down and was working with Jessica, I could not tell you the first thing about neuroscience or the brain, except sometimes I feel like I have one. And I say that because when we look at her application, so I worked with her largely on her essays, making sure everything is framed well. A lot of our conversations were more conceptual and thinking of what are we trying to convey and how we can get that across to the reader. But I made sure to tell her, and I make sure to tell any of my students that are in fields that are not mine, is that balance our meetings with meetings with your faculty. And so Jessica went to a professor that she had been doing research with. And she was getting help on all of the content specific material. And then when she would bring her essays to me, it was like, okay, so how can we frame this in a way that best presents your experiences? And to go back to what I was saying earlier about her experience was focused on movement disorders, and she had a lot of experience in the lab, but she also had experience beyond that in attending different conferences and actually speaking at different conferences regarding movement disorders. And so she was able to balance both her research and her academic experiences with more of her social experiences as well, and how she was able to engage in a community that she was passionate about. So it doesn't all have to be, this is what I've done in the lab, but this is how I've balanced that with maybe the broader impacts of my research. Okay, moving on from Jessica. So that's essentially it for the Goldwater Scholarship. I know that's a lot of information, but we'll have time for questions at the end. Just moving on quickly to the Udall Scholarship. So this one is so Goldwater is much broader in terms of, the fields that they accept. Udall is a little bit more specific in that they are looking for people that are committed to topics related to the environment, or topics that are related to Native American tribal policy or Native American health care. For the latter two, you do need to be a member of either an you need to be of Alaska Native descent, or you need to be of Native American descent to qualify for those two. But the one in regards to the environment is open to anyone. And so just depending on how you classify or depending on your passions, we can talk about the best way for you to tackle this application. This is also open to second and third year students, much like Goldwater. It's not as stringent when it comes to like your GPA. There is a little bit more flexibility here. So it's not just like the tippy top of the GPA. It's a little bit more open. And they do require that you are a U.S. citizen. Now, so this is similar to Goldwater in that they provide you with just a monetary scholarship that you can, again, apply towards just your tuition, your books, your fees. And so whereas Goldwater is essentially just funding and the national recognition that comes along with that, the Udall scholarship is that, but then it also has this 5-day program out in Tucson, Arizona, that they fly you out to meet with the other scholars and to meet with other experts in these different fields. So this has at least that travel component to it, but for the most part, it's still just a scholarship that you can apply towards your tuition and fees. The application, this one's broken down into a bunch of short responses. You do have to do some research on Morris K. and Stuart L. Udall. Some of your responses are just in regards to the work that they do, which to me just sounds like you're stroking their ego a lot. But it's like, if you're going to give me money, I'll do whatever the hell you ask me to do. So that's how, well, we can get into the other minutia. It's also talking about, any research that you've done and what your academic interests are and what your professional interests are relative to this field. Also asking for your transcripts, 3 letters of recommendation, similar to Goldwater. If you can get letters of recommendation from people in your field, that is ideal. From faculty, that is ideal. Our internal deadline, I don't believe has been set yet. My colleague Josh essentially manages this scholarship, but it's going to be sometime in February for a national deadline in March. And so David is that student that I was kind of alluding to earlier, in that he has a very unique undergraduate experience, in that when he started his college journey, he did not perform to where he could. And for many different reasons, either just like not taking college too seriously, partying too much, just did not do very well, and so actually dropped out. But when he did re-enroll and come back to school, came with years later, just a new mission, a new motivation, and a new, this is what I needed to do. He understood what his passions were, and he understood the research and what he was interested in, and did exceptionally well after his return. But the first semester or 2 that he was in college, coupled with it balanced out to a GPA that was not bad, but also not like stellar when we're thinking about these nationally competitive opportunities. But David understood his experience so well, and he could tell his story. And it started with a Gilman Scholarship recipient, which led to a Udall Scholarship recipient, which led to other awards that he received. I believe he is also a Ford Fellow and a McKnight Fellow, which essentially pays for his entire PhD, which he is currently earning. And so just to really reiterate, if you have these passions and you have been experienced in the lab or experienced internationally or experienced in your academics and maybe writing a thesis or whatever that may be, still come and talk to us. I don't want you to opt out of these opportunities. I think David is an excellent example of what you're capable of achieving when you just have a very intimate knowledge of self and your goals. But moving on from that, we also have the Ernest F. Holling Scholarship. And so this has a strong emphasis for people who want to work with NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So it's open to a lot of different STEM fields, but it all kind of funnels back into NOAA. And so this is one that is only available to students in their second year. So if you are a current sophomore, and again, the standard, just be a grade point average, and you fall within these majors, so so oceanic, environmental, biological, and atmospheric sciences, math, engineering, all of that. This is one that you can qualify for if to get 2 fully funded summer internships with NOAA, and also some undergraduate funding that you can apply again towards your tuition, your books, and your fees. So similar to Goldwater in terms of that it's a scholarship that helps you in your undergraduate career, but it does come with those experiential learning opportunities or those summer internships that are 10 weeks long, and you do get paid, which as an undergraduate, those paid internships are few and far between. So if you're in your second year, we definitely encourage you to apply. They pay for all of your travel, and they also provide funding for you to travel to different conferences and even present on the research or the work that you've done. So this is an excellent networking opportunity, similar to the networking opportunity that you can get through Udall. So you're engaging with scholars in your field, as well as getting excellent work experience. The application, it's similar in that the application's dense, but the essays again is talking about like your research that you've done. It's talking about your goals and your professional career goals as well. But they want to know what brought you to this field, like what makes you passionate about just like atmospheric sciences or just the environment or whatever it is your specific interest is. This one only has 2 letters of recommendation. Again, ideally, both are coming from faculty or people you've done research with. So you can kind of start to see there's a lot of common themes between these different applications. They may vary in terms of their specific focus, but it's do well in your academics, get to know your faculty and the people you're researching with, and be able to understand what your goals are within these different fields. So this one is due in January, and I believe it's mid-January. So sometimes those deadlines are a little bit weird because you're coming right out of winter break, and so this is another one to get started on sooner rather than later if it's within your interests. So we can get some work done, maybe the majority of the work done before we head into winter break, and then we can come back and just finish and polish it up in January. We did have a recipient this past year. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get their headshot taken because of COVID. And so these are 2 wonderful individuals who received it in 2018, who both just graduated. But we would love to. So another benefit of working with our office is that we love putting current applicants in contact with alumni of these different programs to get just insight into what the experience was. And we also have plenty of sample essays for us to be able to break down and review to come to a better understanding of how you can present your experiences and your stories. The NSF RUs, which stands for National Science Foundation Research Experience for Undergraduates, is out of the ones that we've talked about thus far, I think is one of the more accessible ones, and that's partly because you can apply to multiple. And so when you find their website, you can search by your specific field, and you can find different research opportunities at different universities throughout the United States. And so where it gets kind of confusing is that because there are so many options, they all vary in terms of when their deadlines are. They all vary in terms of what they're looking for. They all vary in terms of what you need to write and what you need to submit. So no REU is essentially the same. But those applications, those deadlines kind of begin usually sometime around like mid to late October, and they can go all the way until February. And so it's important to do your research now to find what labs and what projects sound interesting to you, know when those deadlines are, and so know when you need to prioritize them. But as you can see, it's a minimum of 10 weeks. So it's essentially the entire summer that you're going to be researching. But again, it's like a fully funded opportunity. So it increases accessibility for a lot of students. I think I probably already covered all of this. You just need to be an enrolled undergraduate student. I mean, ideally, if you have research experience, I think that is going to help set you apart. But you don't necessarily need to be involved in research. So similar to Goldwater, it's just if you have an understanding for what your passions are and how you want to get engaged, that's all you need. But you can apply to as many of these as your schedule allows. And so if you're applying into one specific field, and there's maybe a few different labs that all kind of have it's like studying a similar topic, then in this case, we can work smarter, not harder. And we can just take what you develop for one, kind of adapt it and really just, copy paste and apply to the other. Not advocating for plagiarizing, obviously, but this is a little bit different than like your academic coursework. And you can have the same faculty if this RU requires a letter of recommendation. Most do, but not all of them do. You can let them know, like, hey, these are the ones that I'm applying for. When you write this letter, could you just kind of change out this university name, this project? And so again, working smarter, not harder. Okay, give me a second. Sorry, I've been talking a lot. But these DOD opportunities. So this is for research experience in Germany. You do not need to be proficient in German to be eligible, but it's a fully funded summer opportunity that allows you to engage in research in your field. This application cycle is a little bit different in that you're essentially writing 3 cover letters. I think cover letters are the worst style of writing. Just ever for anything. I hate them, but we can navigate that process and how to write a compelling cover letter. But it's similar to the REUs in that you search by your field of study, and if you find 3 labs that are all studying something similar, then again we can just really focus on one cover letter at first. And then just figure out how we can adapt that to these other labs as well. So it increases your odds because you're applying to 3 that you could be selected for 1. But because these labs are taught in English, like I said, you don't need to be proficient in German. But if you have that proficiency, that could be maybe a plus on your application. Requirements. So you just need to be an enrolled undergraduate. And I thought I updated these dates. My apologies. Essentially, you just need to be an undergraduate applying. You need your resume, you need your transcripts. Again, letters of recommendation, ideally from faculty. But more or less, it's similar to these other opportunities. Just research in your field. It just funds this opportunity for you to travel to Germany. And so I've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but the majority of what my office does is we help you manage these applications and all of these components, not just the written ones. Maybe for those of you who haven't really reached out to faculty yet to write letters of recommendation, I know that can be somewhat of an intimidating process, but we can also work with you and navigate how to best do that. And in certain instances, we also reach out to faculty to give them the resources that they need to write a compelling letter. But I think the greatest benefit of working with our office is that we provide a space for you to reflect on your experiences, not just related to the STEM fields and related to research. A lot of these opportunities are also looking for just who you are as an individual. And if your undergraduate experience is anything like mine, very rarely was I ever asked to talk about myself, my interests, or to tell my story. And so I think there's a lot of benefit in that. So it's kind of balancing a lot of this personal statement writing with your more academic writing. And so that's what we're here to help you do. But like I said, also, like when I was talking about Jessica, our Goldwater recipient from last year, is to balance our meetings with balance with your faculty, or balance that with meetings with your faculty who can work with you on your course specific or your research specific content. Because like I said, I am not a neuroscientist. Now, if any of these sounded interesting to you, would love to talk to you more about them. But also go to our website, which is onf.fsu.edu. We have plenty of other opportunities, not all of them focused on research. And so I understand you may have interest beyond that. And so start getting an idea for these opportunities that we work with, because we have opportunities from your very first semester at Florida State until your very last semester at Florida State, and even opportunities that can fund graduate school. One that we didn't talk about, we talked about the NSF REUs. There is also the NSF GRFP, which stands for Graduate Research Fellowship Program, which is another opportunity that can fully fund a master's or a PhD as long as its focus is in research. But that's one that you apply to fall of your senior year. And so if any of you are seniors, this one is coming up in November. But that is an excellent opportunity for those of you who are maybe lower division students to build up towards. And to be a compelling applicant for that, it's like you need research experience at the very least. But if you have an REU experience or a DOD experience, or ideally maybe even a Goldwater, that holds a lot of weight when you're applying for these upper echelon awards. But at the very least, you don't need these fellowships to get involved in research. So ideally, we like to see these as opportunities that complement the work that you're already doing. And so if you, at the very least, go and talk to your faculty, try to get involved in research. There are programs at Florida State that have structured opportunities, but there's plenty of students that are just engaging in research in their free time. So all I can encourage you to do is just find a research opportunity if that is an interest of yours. And then hopefully we can capitalize on that with some of these fellowship opportunities and hopefully get you some funding to allow you to commit further to your research. And so here you can see something, if you have honors in the major, I believe UROP applications have already passed for first year students, but hopefully some of you have either done UROP or have already applied. Or also find ways as an undergraduate to get involved in research so you can hopefully get published. That's something that as an undergraduate really stands out. Not required, obviously, to be competitive, but really stands out for these nationally competitive awards or when you're applying for graduate school. This is our contact information. Again, my name is Jesse. I would love to speak with you further, but also Josh and Craig would love to find time. If you already have an established relationship with them, feel free to reach out. But it's a little hectic this week and next week because we're in the midst of our Fulbright interviews, but we try to get back to you very quickly. And that is it for me. So let's see, there's another, so unfortunately, you can't apply for Hollings as a junior. I think theirs is it goes by credit hours. So make sure. So I think so go on their website and see what the number of credit hours you have and what Hollings asks for. So you may still fall in the range for what they'd be looking for, but I double check. But it is typically just your sophomore year. Any questions? And if you can unmute yourself, feel free to do so. But that is it from me. Or if you've heard enough, you are more than welcome to bail as well. And hopefully I will hear from you soon.
I have a question about the Goldwater scholarship. So is that conditional on, is there some condition that says after you graduate for X amount of years, you have to stay in a research field after getting funding?
I don't know. To be quite honest, I don't know what their follow-up on that looks. I know they do study it because they do have data that shows the number of students that do stay in research and those that don't. And it's a very overwhelmingly like, yes, they do stay in research or they do pursue their PhD. And so I don't think they're not going to come back and be like, give us our money, because you left the field. But it's something that in your application, we want to make sure everything ties into your passion for research. But if you feel like that's a waning passion already, maybe it's not the best opportunity, but we could find others for you. But they're not going to make you pay anything back. If that, I'm not saying that's what you're asking, but that's where my mind went. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm broke. I work in education. I don't have the money for that. So, any other questions? Thank you so much for attending. If you don't have any questions, feel free to exit. But I'll hang around for a couple more minutes if you do come up with anything.